You can skip looking over there because I hate PowerPoints. I started to hate it after I read a wonderful article how the British Army lost the war in Afghanistan because of PowerPoint. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, it was published by Economist, and it was very serious article about really counting how much time is spent for PowerPoints and how people stop thinking strategically because of the PowerPoints presentations. That's why I definitely put, because Dominic asked a few things over there, but I hope that we will have more of the conversation rather than looking over there. Nevertheless, I will try to speak about the more political rather than anthropological topics that we had before about the conflict currently happening, and I will speak about the European Union involvement because it became one of the main actors, or let's say it was seen as one of the main actors in the peace process in Ukraine. However, one of my main arguments will be to prove how the European Union is not a mediator and not a possible peacekeeper in the conflict in Ukraine, despite all the possible things that they are doing. And definitely when you go to the very theory of the mediation, you need to have several basics, principles, and backgrounds for this. You need to think about the motivation of the mediator. You need to think about leverages that it has, experience that it has, and definitely about the readiness to be involved in the conflict, despite definitely questions of neutrality, timing, stalemate moment, and all the others. And because of this, what I started is from the question, was the European Union ready to be a mediator in Ukraine, and as it was expected, and definitely what was its motivation and experience to do so. And what I will skip mostly in my presentation to the sake of time, but who will be interesting, the first part of the article is mostly devoted to the analyzing of these four main documents, formulating the European foreign and defense strategy, where I was trying to show that mediation almost was absent from the European Union foreign policy tools for many years. From the very beginning, even that European Union single states, member states, were actively involved in the mediation and peacekeeping around the world for centuries, we even can say about some of the countries. But European Union as an organization, even having sometimes some experience, were not considering this as the tool that they can have. And if we go to the territory of the why it was happening, one of the reasons were the perception of the division of the labor. Because for the European Union, it was visible that NATO is the military capabilities of the member states, because we perfectly understand that most of the member states are the same, so it is still their policy and their perception which of the organizations and how to use in this process. And you have NATO as the muscles, so definitely in case it is these kind of the hard security issues, European Union would prefer NATO to be active. I didn't put here Western European Union that till recently was seen as the European Union military cooperation unity. However, because that organization was not active for the last 20 years before it was dissolved anyway, and even European Union was not perceived as something active. The OSCE is another case because for many of these countries it was easier to delegate some of the functions to the OSCE and its presence in many of the conflict zones, because OSCE, especially if we speak about the post-Soviet space, it was the first organizations who really took the responsibility for the resolution of the conflicts in Transnistria, in Georgia, in Nagorno-Karabakh, where still OSCE is the main. And why United Nations? Because in those four documents that I showed, and not only there, but in many of the strategic documents of the European Union, even in the latest global European strategy that was published in July 2016, it is still said that European Union is ready to be active in the peacekeeping after the United Nations, meaning it's ready to support the United Nations peacekeeping, it's ready to provide both physical, material, political support to the United Nations. Or the second, if you study the history of the European Union peacekeeping involvement, there were not so many missions till now, but all of them were coming after the United Nations. So it was after either, for example, like in Kosovo, when the United Nations was a little bit withdrawing its forces and European Union were taking the place, or in the case when United Nations needed some serious support and European Union were joining United Nations. But anyway, in all these variants, the United Nations came first and then the European Union becoming involving. So when you came to the post-Soviet space, they were not this case because the United Nations were, we can say it is absent from the Transnistrian conflict. The United Nations is absent from the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And in Georgia, it was present only in one from two in the limited capacity being present there. So the European Union lost its entrance point, if we can say, at the post-Soviet space in the conflict resolution. The situation started to be changed in 2005. And why 2005? Because when it was Ukrainian initiative, quite a weak initiative, but nevertheless, when the peace format changed to so-called 5+2. Transnistria, Moldova, Ukraine, Russia, and OSCE as official mediators, plus the United States and European Union. So when the European Union for the first time was invited to be involved in the peace process, it still had its limitations that I will explain later. But however, it was first entrance to this region. Russian Georgia War 2008 changed the situation dramatically. It was the first time when it was the European Union as a mediator, and when it was not a single, even that we say Sarkozy plan, but why Sarkozy? Not because, as yesterday it was said, that France can be strong in this, but just because France was presiding at the European Union at that time. So definitely as the leading country at that moment, they needed to intervene. So it was definitely a success in terms that it was for the first time when European Union were able to speak with a single voice, to present some consolidated opinion and really to reach something. We can discuss how successful or not successful was that mediation because the conflict was not completely solved and with all the consequences later. However, it reached its goal to sign a ceasefire and to stop fighting. So in this case, we can name it a first success of European Union there. Black Sea Synergy is a document for the Black Sea region where we can see the formulation of the policy, because in the Black Sea it's only these four conflicts that existed, and European Union there also was saying it is in some way connecting the second and the third point, that very often for the European Union, the actions in the conflict zone, it is confidence building measures or reconstruction and peace building actions, which is not the same as the mediation and peacekeeping. Because confidence building is usually coming later after you already set some peace agreement between the conflicting parties or you are ready for reconstruction. Sometimes why these methods were mostly used, it is the issue of the frozenness of freezing of the conflicts, because when it is not fighting, you're using completely different methods than you have a real war. So why it was that important for us? Because the Ukrainian crisis showed completely different situation. We can say that European Union started to be involved in Ukrainian situation earlier than 2013. It started with the Cox-Kwasniewski mission of the European Parliament, who started to be a mediator in what we know as case of Tymoshenko. And this case of Tymoshenko, it was the first attempt of the European Union institutions, because in this case we see European Parliament as a part of the European Union whole structure, how they tried to intervene there. So they already had their foot inside of the Ukrainian situation when the Euromaidan started and happened later. The issue is that when we go to all previous experience of the European Union, one of the main leverages for them always were future European integration. If you go to the Serbia-Kosovo rapprochement and the peace process there negotiated by the European Union recently, the prospects of the European Union integration was one of the most important, why countries were agreeing to some compromises. They knew what will be the price in the end. In case of Ukraine, this completely couldn't work. It couldn't work because for some sides, European integration was seen as a reason for the conflict, meaning that accepting this leverage from the European Union was completely not possible for the adversaries. If for Ukraine it was important, so for the separatist regions and even more for the Russian Federation, definitely the prospects of the European Union integration is nothing but even seen as the main problem. That's why it's completely not working over there. The second question that were raised for the European Union is the European Union is an honest broker, or it is the party which has interest in the conflict. And usually we know neutrality is the myth for the mediation, but we used to speak about impartiality of the mediator. When the European Union introduced sanctions for for Russia because of the Ukrainian crisis, immediately we raised the question, can we consider now the European Union as an impartial part to this conflict or no? And definitely the question what drives the European Union to be involved, because usually the conflicting parties, to accept the mediator, they need to ask the question why you are coming here. And here some of the experts are trying to understand, is it the internal security of the European Union what is important for it, or it is the human security? Meaning, was the European Union afraid that Ukrainian crisis can have a spillover effect, and in case they would not intervene, it can really touch their own security, or it was just sympathy and feelings about the necessity to assist the partners and the neighboring countries with their own human security issues. Also, what are the possible variants? And it seems to me this and the next one are the last one that I have, so we'll be on time with this. Why I'm arguing Geneva format and Normandy format are two main formats for the peace process that we had. Geneva was the first one. It was already in spring 2014 when in Geneva, the United States, European Union, Russia and Ukraine met and negotiated the first issues about the crisis. However, after this, because the United States didn't want to be involved that much in the conflict, so the format was not working that much, and European Union appeared not being ready to speak at the single voice about this crisis. So the Normandy format appeared where we see France and Germany as the mediators rather than the European Union as an organization. And for me, it is quite an interesting example because for many, it was understandable why Germany is a mediator. Because Germany is a leading state, strong state, with interest leverages, everything understandable. People were asking what France is doing there. And for me, one of the answers were that France is chaperone. France is over, it's looking over Germany at the first stage. We're speaking when the Normandy format was just created. It's looking over Germany not to make confession to Russia, not to make some agreements with Russia, what other European Union countries would not like, but also to show that it is not a single Germany mediation, but that European Union is present there. So you need to have at least two countries to show it. As a result, it became weakness, definitely, of the format, because for Russia, it gave a good signal that European Union is not able to speak with a single voice and that you can try to separate the countries with their different perceptions and methods toward the resolution of the country. The prevention and early warning, it is the idea of it's more for the peacekeepers that we are coming over there, that some of the authors were discussing that the European Union as a peacekeeper could be successful if it would come when Crimea happened, just after the Crimea, to prevent events in Donbass, to set the mission like it was in Macedonia as the peace prevention mission, as a police mission, to help the Ukrainian enforcement structures who were destroyed and not capable to provide the services to prevent further developments. However, when the conflict really started, European Union became incapable because it didn't have experience, forces, and possibility to be involved. The National Security Council of Ukraine in February 2015 issued a decision to call for the European Union and the United Nations to send their peacekeepers to Ukraine. And it seems to me that decision of the National Security Council was one of the least prepared and even a big mistake of the National Security Council, because they completely couldn't understand what does mean European Union as a peacekeeper, because they said it a police mission. What was very interesting, because the European Union police missions never military. The United Nations police mission, they are military missions. But the European Union police missions, that is advising missions, civilian missions, who are usually helping with the reforms rather than with the functions that we needed. So currently, and that is our conclusions, first of all, we can say easily that European Union now is not a mediator in Ukraine. It is rather single states who are mediators. The second conclusions that we have, that European Union lost its, because of the reasons for the conflict, it lost its traditional leverages and possibilities to be involved in the conflict. So it needs to search for the new opportunities. That economic sanctions definitely influence the impartiality. And the last but not the least, that the common security and defense operation of the European Union could be successful in spring 2014. But currently, it is completely ephemeric perspective.